I'm excited to be here with Josh Sayles, Director of the Community Relations Council for the Pittsburgh Jewish Federation, CRC Chair Bob Silverman, incoming Chair Larry Lebowitz, a Temple member. I'm so grateful for all of your time today. Josh, can we start with you? Would you say just a little bit more for those who are joining us, what the CRC is, how it operates? Why is this something that is important for the Jewish community to have?
So there are 125 CRCs across the country. Pittsburgh, even though we are in population a medium-sized city, we have such a strong Jewish community here that in the CRC and in the Jewish Federation system, we're considered a large city federation and a large city CRC. Community Relations Council, we serve as the liaison from the organized Jewish community to all of the other communities in Pittsburgh. So when you talk about ethnic communities or religious communities or government relations, we have our hands in all of that work. So whether you're talking about the police brutality protests and Black Lives Matter, we've been working with the Black community, certainly longer than the last few months, but definitely over the last month and a half or so since the protests started. Jewish communal security funding in Harrisburg, you may have heard about state funding for security that 15 of our Jewish organizations got in March. And forgive me, I can't remember if Temple Emmanuel was one of those organizations off the top of my head. That was because of lobbying efforts that we had been doing with our partners in Harrisburg and in Philadelphia. And our community wasn't taking the lead on because of the shooting at the Tree of Life Synagogue. So all of those things, whether they're current events or long-term projects, that's kind of that's the role that the Community Relations Council has. We try to be the face of the Jewish community. In terms of structure, there's actually 3 levels of that. The main Community Relations Council committee consists of 20 Jewish lay leaders throughout the greater Pittsburgh region, including Bob and Larry. We also have a Young Leaders Community Relations Council that is for up and coming Jewish leaders who want to get involved in community relations work. We also have what is called the Greater Pittsburgh Jewish Council. And through the Greater Pittsburgh Jewish Council, we convene all of the lay and professional leadership, the top leadership in every Jewish organization throughout the city, basically to share information and to share resources and to get opinions on where the Jewish community may stand on important kind of community events, whether they're Jewish or not Jewish. It's become an increasingly important tool over the last couple of years. It was launched formally in early October, just a few weeks before the shooting at Tree of Life, and was an incredible communication tool in kind of getting information out to the community. That list is often used by our security director, Sean Brokos, as that work continues, and also has been an important tool as we share COVID resources with the community.
Thank you so much. And indeed, Temple was one of the recipients of that security grant. Thank you so much for your hard work making it happen. And I'd also be remiss if I didn't insert here a thank you to all of our state legislators, Dan Miller, Pam Iavino, and Natalie Mihalik, who put forward letters of recommendation on our behalf. A thank you to all of you. Josh, you were one of the first people that I met with when I had the pleasure of arriving in Pittsburgh because of our shared values around this work. I'd love for you to say a little bit more about why this is so important. Why are those community relationships important to you? And why do you believe they're so important for the Jewish community?
I thought we got together because we both really like Mexican food.
That is true, and I'm appreciative of your driving down to the South Hills and destabilizing that bridge stereotype about y'all in the city.
I mean, I think there's two ways to look at this, right? And I think both are correct in that. But one really is, in order to build a strong, thriving, vibrant Jewish community in Pittsburgh, you need to make sure that all of the other communities are strong and thriving and vibrant as well. And it's our role as the Jewish community that is a minority community, but traditionally has had a little bit more resources than most other minority communities, to share a little bit of the wealth and to help build all of Pittsburgh and not just ourselves. It's the right thing to do. So that's one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is that when things go horribly wrong, we really, really, really need friends. And I don't like to keep referring back to the shooting at Tree of Life, because the Jewish community is so much bigger than that. But I also, it's such a monumental day in the life of the Jewish community in Pittsburgh. But when we had, for example, the ceremony at Soldiers and Sailors the day after the shooting at Sunday night, and there were about 150 clergy who showed up on stage at the end of that ceremony when all of the clergy were called up on stage. And certainly a number of those clergy wanted to be there to support the Jewish community and would have been there regardless. But I don't think that it would have been nearly the number it was if the Community Relations Council hadn't been in place and building those relationships for years prior.
Wonderful. Bob, when you picked up the phone and agreed to be a chair of the CRC, I suspect they promised you something a little bit different than what the years of your tenure held. You've been part of this organization, serving on the committee and then as chair during some really pivotal times for the Pittsburgh Jewish community. Would you share a little bit more about some of those defining moments?
Yeah, there's been a lot of, it was probably a strong arm tactic, even more than a phone call, but no, it was, I'm glad I said yes. There's been a lot. Josh covered an awful lot of those important times, but and to rattle off a bunch, and say some of the highlights, presiding over the first Greater Pittsburgh Jewish Council, was a big deal. And as Josh mentioned, how important that ultimately became in the subsequent days after the Tree of Life, and even now for information. Certainly the tragedy at Tree of Life, or L'Simcha and or Hadash congregation, is unshakably one of the most significant moments. And again, Soldiers and Sailors the next day, the CRC got the work we did up until that point, for sure, played a part, that was mentioned. Going with Josh and Governor Wolf outside of the Tree of Life building is something that sticks in my head as a pretty just memorable moment, of one of the things that I feel being in the position that was very memorable. Going inside Tree of Life with the legislature, PA legislature, and Governor Fetterman, unshakably won't leave my brain ever. But what that meant is one of the many steps along the way that ultimately led to the security money that fortunately Temple and many other organizations ended up with. There's no doubt that something like that, or another moment, which was the joint legislature, the Senate and the House in the General Assembly, to make that trip with the families of all three synagogues, and to sit in the chamber. And the last time that happened was after 9/11, was beyond powerful. And for everyone sitting there, I can't imagine it just didn't move them. And it certainly had to have had an impact on them, because the security money came in a good way, and hopefully we can build on that hopefully in the future. But that's the kind of work I personally, I don't love why, I love that type of work. Having the opportunity to meet face to face with our senators and congressmen, perhaps with a greater ear and greater ability for their attention, was huge. Personally, to be one of the representatives on the ice for the Penguins for the national anthem, and heroes from the Pittsburgh police who went into the building, was something I'll never forget. And to be able to spend time with them at the game was a tremendous experience. And then subsequently, the Bhutanese community going to a vigil, a candlelight vigil, was just an incredible experience. Going to the Hill District soon after, and the show of support by the African American community was also phenomenal. And here we are now with everything that's going on, with the violence and so on to the Black community, and we're trying to do what we can to show our support as much as possible. But it just goes on and on. I mean, Christchurch in New Zealand with the Muslim community, the money that the Pittsburgh Federation was able to raise largely because of we were a focal point, perhaps in the world. People look to us. We were able to raise a lot of money for that community. And so that and supporting the Muslim community here was memorable. It could go on and on. I mean, I started like writing things down. The Hindu community had an incredible event. The Sikh community had a great event, and just all this, the relationships that are around. We have a beautiful city here and a beautiful community, and out of tragedy, a lot of it really has shined, but it has to be fostered, and the work continues. But those are some of the many things. Poway, Jersey City, COVID, working with the Chinese community and trying to prevent their fighting racism early on, and even still with no help to our elected leaders, shall go nameless, but not helping on that. So, and also currently with the Jewish community and the struggles now with navigating, just getting hopefully funding and for the people in need now with everything that's going on with coronavirus. So.
It is an absolutely overwhelming list, and just how incredibly fortunate the Pittsburgh Jewish community is to have you in place during all of these momentous affairs. With all due respect to the rest of Federation, I think you also get to work with one of the most amazing teams in the organization to try to stay on top and to represent the Jewish community. And so thank you, Josh, and your team as well. Relationships are so important, and you shared how many relationships the Jewish community in Pittsburgh holds simultaneously, to have a seat at the table and to be able to help not only intra to the Jewish community, but also in the broader world. I'm curious, what's next as you look through this summer? You mentioned there's always more work to be doing. What do you have an eye on now as your term comes to an end, but certainly not your passion for this work? Or I'm sure Josh isn't going to let his claws out of you so soon. What do you have an eye on?
Well, first and foremost, I'm glad you mentioned to rattle a list off like that. And not have Josh, Sayles, Laura Turner, and the Federation team, who were incredible. None of that would have happened without that support. We're very, very lucky to have Josh, Laura, and Federation. I can't imagine. My family in Jersey City, and I saw what happened there, and it paled in comparison to the network and support we have here. So I can tell you we are very fortunate to have what we have and the people that we have in this city. So so hats off to that team. But the remainder of my tenure, certainly continuing and working with the Black community and to do whatever we can to be good listeners, and at the same time to not just be sitting and waiting too long to take whatever action we can. I don't want to get in anybody's way. Sometimes it's just being there in support and being at the right. By being there, you can also be there to listen, to show up to whether it's a press conference, a protest, or just somewhere where where you can hear and get a pulse and understand what is needed in a positive, peaceful, constructive way is important. Certainly coronavirus doesn't appear to be going away, and that is a concern, and our community is still very much in need. There are still a lot of people who are hungry. There are still a lot of people who are in financial need. It's unfortunately, that's still going to pose a challenge long past August. And another thing that still hasn't really been off the list, and it's been one of the bigger challenges. It's very hard to be proactive on any cause with the past 2 years responding to the random craziness and unpredictable nature of the world we live in. But gun violence and education and working on that is something that we have people who are very passionate in our CRC that would want to work on that, and it is, and I believe, in our city as well. And there's really a lot of common sense areas that JFNA and CRC and others in our community that we could partner and be constructive, and that's an area that I would like to begin, and hopefully with Larry's leadership moving forward. And I'm not leaving CRC, and hopefully that will continue even past the end of my term.
It's so important. Thank you. And as you mentioned, you have a good guy filling your shoes in just a few months' time. Larry, I'm curious to know how you agreed to this. Seeing what happened to Bob, you still said yes. No, your values and your responsibilities seem to align perfectly with this position. But I'm curious to know more about your thinking. Why was this how you want to be spending your time right now?
Well, Rabbi, first of all, thanks for having me on. And I want to just start by saying I have been so impressed with the work of Josh and Bob and the entire CRC. I've been involved for about a year and really have been very much in a learning process, learning what the CRC does, learning how the CRC can be so impactful and effective. And the reason that I agreed to take it on was because really two things. One, it was a wonderful opportunity for me to serve our community. And I mean our local community, our Jewish community, in ways that frankly, I really never thought were possible. The role of the CRC, as explained by Josh, really is a multifaceted one, which gives us exposure to so many different communities and so many important projects. So what a wonderful way to serve our community by being the chair of the CRC. The other reason is kind of selfish, Rabbi. I mean, I'm looking at this as a real learning experience for myself. I've had very little exposure to a lot of the groups that Josh mentioned. The causes are near and dear to my heart, but not something that I've really worked in. As you know, I've spent the last 9 years on the school board in Mount Lebanon, and that's kind of been the focus of my activities outside of my family and my work. This is a really nice opportunity to learn personally and to do some good things. So I'm excited about it. I am going to desperately need the support of Josh and Laura. And believe me, Bob, he is not out of it. He will still continue to be involved, and I will make sure that happens.
Absolutely. And, you know, we spoke earlier this pandemic, whenever that was, about the work that you do, and watching the news cycle to be in immigration law right now is not going to be a restful and relaxing professional time as you take on this responsibility as well. But as the adage is, when you need something done, you ask a busy person, because you have both the connections and the passions to see it through. On the passion front, I'd love to know what you would like from your home synagogue community. What can Temple Emmanuel and our congregants do to support the work of the CRC and to get further involved?
Well, I think that there is, unfortunately, continues to be a bit of a disconnect between what's going on in Squirrel Hill and the rest of Pittsburgh and the South Hills Jewish community. The fact that Bob is a member of Bethel, has been leading the CRC, has been a really nice connector, but I don't know that there is much of a connection with Temple. Maybe there are some people who have been more involved than I'm aware, but I don't think there has been much. So I'm excited to try to help make that connection. And Rabbi, you're kind of at the core of that, because I know this is one of your passions. You and I have talked about that quite a bit. But there may be situations where I can lean on some people at Temple to come forth and express an interest in different things that we're doing. I mean, one thing that comes to mind is for us to do a better job of publicizing the work of the CRC, because I know how many different social causes Temple Emmanuel gets behind, and I'm pretty certain that there's a lot of people who would be interested in these. So I think it's more of a communication thing, and I think people will come out. And, you know, what Josh and Bob mentioned were the various events that they've attended and participated in over the years. There's a lot of them, Rabbi, and I can't go to all of them, nor can Josh or Laura, other people. So having people simply show up, as these guys have made clear to me, can often be the majority role that CRC plays. So I'm going to look to Temple members to support what I'm doing and what the organization's doing.
I think that greater communication is so important. As you say, all of the different things that Josh and Bob have mentioned are things very close to the hearts of our members as well. And we are eager to jump into this work with all of you. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for everything you do professionally and in a professional volunteer capacity to lead this organization, to really serve as leaders for the Pittsburgh Jewish community. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.